Your position here is terminated, effective immediately, Oren declared. His finger pointed directly at my chest like a weapon. His voice cut through the conference room with surgical precision as 20 pairs of eyes shifted uncomfortably in my direction. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, suddenly ice cold, gripped the leather portfolio I'd prepared for this quarterly meeting, filled with charts documenting our territory's record-breaking growth. 6 years, he continued, pacing slowly around the polished conference table. And what have we really gained from your contributions? The pause before the last word dripped with contempt. The meeting had begun normally. Coffee cups steamed, notebooks opened, the usual mumbled small talk floating around as everyone settled in. Then, Oren had moved to the presentation screen, bypassing the agenda entirely, and locked his gaze on me. "We need someone who delivers actual results," he announced to the room. "Someone innovative. Someone who doesn't ride on others' successes." My mind raced through the previous quarter's numbers. My territories had outperformed every other division by 23%. The client retention rate had reached its highest point in company history. 3 major accounts that had been considered untouchable had signed under my guidance. "I don't understand," I managed, my voice embarrassingly small in the cavernous room. "My territories are..." Your territories?" Oren's eyebrows arched as several executives exchanged glances. "That's precisely the problem, isn't it? The collaborative approach I implemented is what turned those numbers around. Your resistance to the new framework has become problematic." My throat closed as I recognized the narrative he was constructing. The collaborative approach he referenced had been my creation entirely, a restructuring I designed after identifying critical gaps in our client engagement model. But the framework was my Vivica, he interrupted, using my full name rather than Viv, which everyone called me. "This isn't the time for debate. The decision has been made at the highest levels. We need forward-thinking leadership, not outdated methodologies." My vision narrowed as 20 colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, watched in silence. No one spoke, no one objected. The room felt suddenly vast and cold. "Be gone by noon," Oren concluded with the ghost of a smile touching the corner of his mouth. "HR will assist with your exit paperwork." I sat paralyzed, my career collapsing around me in real time. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, missed birthdays, canceled vacations, all culminating in this public execution. The projector hummed in the background. Someone's watch ticked. Someone else coughed softly into their hand. Then a chair scraped against the floor. "One moment, please." The voice came from the far end of the table where the junior staff typically sat, almost forgotten in these executive meetings. Clara, my intern for the past 3 months, stood with her laptop clutched against her chest. At 23, she looked impossibly young among the senior staff, her gaze steady despite the tremor in her hands. "This isn't appropriate, Clara," Oren said, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist. "Return to your seat." But Clara was already moving forward, her steps deliberate as she approached the head of the table. "Everyone should see this first," she said, placing her laptop down and turning the screen toward Oren. "It's relevant to this discussion." Oren leaned forward, annoyance etched across his features, until he saw what was on the screen. His expression shifted so dramatically it was as if someone had drained all color from his face. He stumbled back a half step, his hand bracing against the table for support. Clara looked directly at him and spoke 5 words that caused the entire room to freeze. "She's standing right behind you." Oren spun around so quickly he nearly lost his balance. There, filling the doorway with her commanding presence, stood Margot Renner, the legendary industry pioneer, whose visit wasn't scheduled until the following week. Her silver hair was pulled back in her signature severe bun, her penetrating gaze taking in the scene before her. Everyone recognized her instantly. Margot had transformed our entire industry over 3 decades, building an empire from nothing. Her rare visits to companies our size were considered career-defining opportunities, and she had just witnessed my public execution. "Interesting timing," Margot said, her voice surprisingly soft for someone whose decisions impacted thousands of careers. "I specifically came early to meet the innovator behind your company's remarkable territory transformation." Her eyes moved deliberately from Oren to me, then back again. It appears I've arrived at a pivotal moment. The silence that followed stretched like an eternity, with 22 people barely breathing as we waited for what would happen next. If you're finding yourself caught up in this story of workplace betrayal, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people discover these stories of justice and redemption, and your support means everything. Now, let's continue with what happened after Margot Renner walked through that door. My name is Vivica, Viv to anyone who knows me. I grew up in a small town where expectations for girls rarely extended beyond marriage and motherhood. My father ran the local hardware store. My mother taught second grade, and life followed predictable patterns until I won a national business competition my senior year of high school. That unexpected victory opened doors to a university education I otherwise couldn't have afforded. I studied marketing and business strategy, graduating at the top of my class despite working 2 jobs to cover expenses. While classmates networked at exclusive events, I served them drinks as a campus catering assistant. Those years taught me to observe, to recognize patterns in how people operated, what motivated them, what made them feel valued. After graduation, I joined a mid-sized company with big ambitions but outdated approaches. I started in the lowest position, answering phones and scheduling meetings, but I watched. I listened. I identified inefficiencies no one else seemed to notice. By my second year, I developed an alternative strategy for client engagement that addressed critical gaps. My direct supervisor, impressed by my analysis, allowed me to test my approach with our smallest, most challenging territory, the one everyone else had written off. Within 6 months, that territory's performance had increased by 37%. Within a year, it led all other divisions. My innovative framework, focused on personalized client journeys rather than generic touchpoints, became the template for other struggling territories. That's when Oren first noticed me. As Executive Vice President of Client Relations, he recognized a rising star when he saw one. He became my mentor, showcasing my work to senior leadership, inviting me to high-level strategy meetings, positioning me for advancement. "You have something special, Viv," he told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "You see connections others miss. This company needs that perspective." For 3 years, we worked as an effective team. I developed strategies. He provided the platform for implementation. My territories consistently outperformed projections. Clients requested me specifically for their accounts. My future seemed limitless. Then everything changed. The catalyst was an industry conference in Denver last autumn. I presented our territory transformation strategy to a packed room, explaining the personalized framework I'd developed. Afterward, several people approached with questions, including an elegant, silver-haired woman who asked particularly insightful questions about my methodology. "Your approach is refreshingly client-centered," she commented before handing me her card. "Most companies still focus on their internal processes rather than actual client needs." It wasn't until she walked away that I looked down and saw the name on the card. Margot Renner, founder and CEO of Renner International. My hands trembled as I slipped the card into my pocket. Margot rarely engaged with professionals at my level or companies our size. When I returned to the office the following Monday, I shared the encounter with Oren, excited by the potential connection. His reaction surprised me, his usual warm support replaced by tight-lipped calculation. "Margot Renner spoke to you specifically?" he asked, leaning forward in his chair. "What exactly did you tell her about our methodologies?" "Just an overview of the framework, the same material from my presentation," I explained, confused by his intensity. "Next time, direct those inquiries to me," he said. "As EVP, I should handle communications with industry leaders of that caliber." I nodded, though something about his reaction felt off. Later that week, I received an email from Margot's chief of staff requesting a follow-up conversation about our client engagement model. Following protocol, I forwarded the email to Oren. He responded immediately, "I'll handle this. Focus on your territories." 2 days later, I discovered Oren had scheduled a video call with Margot without including me. When I asked about it, he explained it was standard procedure for executive leadership to manage relationships with potential partners. But she asked specifically about my framework, I pointed out. Your framework? His tone shifted slightly. Viv, you've done excellent work implementing our company's strategic vision, but let's be clear about ownership here. That conversation marked the beginning of the shift. Suddenly, my most successful strategies were described in team meetings as our executive approach rather than Viv's framework. My direct access to senior leadership became limited. Oren began joining my client calls, smoothly interjecting himself into relationships I'd spent years building. During presentations, he would stand slightly ahead of me, physically positioning himself as the authority. When clients praised specific elements of my strategy, he would nod appreciatively and say, "Yes, I developed that approach after noticing gaps others had missed." The first time he did it, I was too shocked to respond. By the third time, I recognized the pattern but struggled to address it without appearing territorial or unprofessional. Then came the account reassignments. First one major client, then another, transferred from my oversight to cross-functional teams that reported directly to Oren. The explanation was always the same: strategic alignment for optimal client outcomes. With each transfer, my performance metrics suffered. Territories I'd transformed were no longer counted in my results. New performance standards appeared that emphasized areas outside my reassigned responsibilities. I might have doubted my own perception if not for Clara. The intern had joined us 3 months earlier. Quiet, observant, seemingly unremarkable among the ambitious young professionals who cycled through our department. She had been assigned to me initially, then partially reassigned to assist Oren as well. "He's systematically pushing you out," she whispered during a lunch break 6 weeks ago. "I've been organizing his files. He's taking your most successful accounts, then changing how success is measured to make you look ineffective." "That can't be right," I said, though the pit in my stomach suggested otherwise. "We've worked together for years. He's always supported my advancement." Clara looked at me with unexpected intensity. "Until you became a threat, until Margot Renner showed interest in your work specifically." That afternoon, I accessed the shared calendar and discovered something that confirmed my worst fears. Margot Renner was scheduled to visit our offices in 3 weeks. The calendar entry, created by Oren, noted presentation of territory transformation strategy and client retention framework. My strategy, with my name nowhere in the meeting notes. I confronted him that same day, stepping into his office and closing the door behind me. "I saw Margot Renner is visiting," I said, watching his expression carefully. "I'd like to prepare the presentation on the territory framework." "That won't be necessary," he replied, barely glancing up from his computer. "I'll handle the presentation." "But it's my framework," I said, the words falling between us like stones. "I developed it, tested it, refined it over 4 years." Finally, he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Did you develop it using company resources, during company time, with company data?" "Yes, but..." "Then it's company intellectual property, implemented under my executive direction." His voice remained calm, reasonable. "Your contributions have been noted, Viv, but this presentation requires executive-level positioning." "You're taking credit for my work," I said plainly. His expression hardened. "That's an inappropriate accusation. I'm concerned about your perspective lately. In fact, I've been reviewing your recent performance metrics, and there are troubling patterns emerging. Because you've reassigned my successful accounts and changed the measurement criteria," I countered. "This defensive attitude is exactly the problem." He sighed heavily, as if disappointed. "Perhaps we should discuss your future here more broadly. Your approaches are becoming outdated, and your client relationships aren't delivering the results we need." I left his office in a daze, the threat unmistakable. Over the next 2 weeks, the isolation intensified. Team members who previously sought my input were directed elsewhere. My access to certain data systems became temporarily unavailable due to updates. Projects I'd initiated were reassigned for continuity planning. The morning of the quarterly meeting, the day Oren chose for my public dismissal, began like any other. I arrived early, prepared my presentation materials, and reviewed my territory numbers one last time. Despite the targeted reassignments, my remaining accounts still showed significant growth. I believed, naively perhaps, that facts would protect me. that 6 years of documented success would shield me from whatever Oren was planning. I was wrong. As I sat in that conference room, publicly labeled a failure before colleagues who knew better, but said nothing, I thought my career was finished. The humiliation burned through me like acid, rendering me temporarily mute, unable to defend myself against the calculated dismantling of my professional reputation. Then Clara stood up with her laptop. Then she spoke those 5 words that made Oren's face go white. "She's standing right behind you." And there was Margot Renner, watching it all unfold with those penetrating eyes that had built an industry empire. "I specifically requested to meet with Vivica," Margot said, entering the room fully now, her assistant following with a leather portfolio. "I was told she would be presenting the territory transformation framework she discussed at the Denver conference." Oren's recovery was impressively quick. His spine straightened as he stepped forward with an extended hand. "Ms. Renner, we weren't expecting you until next week. What a delightful surprise. I was just discussing some necessary organizational changes with the team." Margot ignored his outstretched hand, her gaze fixed on me instead. "Ms. Vivica, I've reviewed the materials you shared after our Denver conversation. Your approach to client-centered territory development is precisely what I've been seeking to implement across my own organizations." The room had gone completely still. 20 colleagues held their breath as Oren's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. "There seems to be some confusion," Oren interjected, his voice tight. "The framework Ms. Renner is referring to was developed under my executive direction. Vivica merely implemented certain elements." "That's not what my records indicate," Margot interrupted, nodding to her assistant who produced several documents from the portfolio. "I have copies of the original strategy documents, complete with creation dates and revision history, all authored by Vivica." But how? I had never sent Margot those internal documents. They were accessible only through our secure company systems. As confusion washed over me, I caught Clara's eye from across the room. The slight nod she gave me caused the first crack in my understanding of what was truly happening here. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't luck. This was something else entirely. And suddenly I realized that everything from my humiliation to Margot's timely arrival was unfolding according to a plan I hadn't even known existed. As the room descended into uncomfortable silence, I watched Oren's confident facade begin to crack. A muscle twitched at the corner of his jaw, his hands clasping and unclasping at his sides. "Perhaps," Margot suggested, her voice carrying effortlessly through the tension, "we should continue this discussion more privately." Oren nodded quickly, gesturing toward the door. "Of course. My office would be more appropriate for—" "Not your office," Margot interrupted. "A neutral location, and I'd like Ms. Vivica to join us." Her eyes moved to me, then to Clara. "Along with your assistant, who seems quite informed about the situation." "Clara is just an intern," Oren dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Nevertheless," Margot insisted, "I'd like her present." 20 minutes later, we sat in the small conference room on the building's top floor, a space typically reserved for board meetings. Margot at the head of the table, Oren and I on opposite sides, Clara positioned beside me with her laptop open. "Let me be transparent about my purpose here," Margot began, her fingers steepled before her. 3 months ago, I began receiving communications about an innovative territory development framework. The strategy precisely addressed challenges my own company has been struggling with for years. As I explained in our previous discussions, Oren started, leaning forward eagerly. "I wasn't speaking with you." Margot cut him off without even glancing in his direction. "The communications came from 3 former clients of yours who now work with my organization. All 3 independently cited Vivica as the architect of the approach that transformed their businesses." My mind raced through client relationships, trying to identify which 3 had moved to Margot's company. Tarek from the healthcare division? Maybe Jasmine, who'd left for a senior position somewhere last year? "When I met Ms. Vivica in Denver," Margot continued, "her explanation of the framework confirmed everything I'd heard. That's why I reached out to schedule this visit, to discuss potentially implementing her methodology across my organization, possibly even bringing her on board as a consultant." Oren's smile had gone rigid. "While Vivica has certainly contributed to our success, The framework you're referring to was developed under my strategic direction. As I was explaining to the team before your arrival, we're making some organizational changes to better align with our future goals. By firing the creator of the very strategy that caught my attention, Margot observed dryly. Performance issues, Oren insisted. Recent metrics show, may I? Clara interrupted, turning her laptop screen toward Margot. These are the original performance metrics for Ms. Vivica's territories before the recent adjustments. Oren's head snapped toward Clara, his expression darkening. Those are confidential internal documents. Accessing them without authorization is grounds for immediate termination. Clara's face remained impassive. I have authorization. As Ms. Vivica's assigned analytics support, I have legitimate access to all historical performance data. You were reassigned to my office 3 weeks ago, Oren countered. Partially reassigned, Clara corrected. I maintained my original access permissions. Nothing I've accessed falls outside my authorized scope. Something in Clara's calm precision gave me pause. The timid intern who had watched silently from corners now faced down an executive without flinching. Who was this woman really? Margot studied the screen, scrolling through what appeared to be years of performance data. Fascinating. According to these records, territories under Ms. Vivica's direct management consistently outperformed all others by significant margins, until approximately 7 weeks ago, when several key accounts were suddenly reassigned. Strategic realignment, Oren insisted, and coincidentally, Clara added, pulling up another document, these reassignments began precisely 3 days after Ms. Renner's office first contacted the company about Ms. Vivica's framework. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Margot turned her penetrating gaze to Oren, who had begun to sweat visibly at his temples. It appears, Margot said carefully, that I've interrupted quite an orchestrated scenario. This is being grossly mischaracterized, Oren protested, his voice strained. These are internal matters that directly impact my interest in your company's approach. Margot finished for him. I came here specifically to meet the innovator behind a strategy I consider revolutionary. Instead, I witnessed that person's public termination by someone now claiming credit for their work. She turned to me. Ms. Vivica, I'd like to continue our discussion about your framework without interference. Would tomorrow morning be convenient? My hotel at 9? Before I could answer, Oren stood abruptly. This is highly irregular. Any discussions about company methodologies must include executive leadership. Mr. Brenner, Margot said, using his name for the first time, I believe Ms. Vivica's employment status was just terminated in front of 20 witnesses. Unless that decision has been reversed, she's free to discuss her expertise with whomever she chooses. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. If Oren rescinded my termination, he'd have to explain to leadership why he'd attempted to fire a valuable employee. If he maintained it, he'd lose control over Margot's interest in my framework. There may have been a misunderstanding, he said finally, visibly calculating his options. Perhaps we should postpone any definitive decisions about Ms. Vivica's position until after a more thorough performance review. How generous, Margot remarked, her tone making it clear she recognized the transparent maneuver. Ms. Vivica, my offer stands regardless of your employment status here. Thank you, I said, finding my voice at last. I'd be happy to meet tomorrow. As the meeting concluded, Margot departed with her assistant, leaving the three of us in a silence charged with unspoken threats. Oren's eyes had gone cold. Any pretense of mentorship or collegiality vanished. This isn't over, he said quietly. You've made a serious miscalculation. He left without another word, the door closing firmly behind him. I turned to Clara, seeing her clearly for the first time. Who are you really? I asked. And what just happened? Clara closed her laptop, her movements deliberate and controlled. I'm exactly who I said I am, your intern, but perhaps with a more specific purpose than you realized. You engineered this entire scenario, I said, the pieces falling into place. Margot's early arrival, the documentation, the timing. Not entirely, she said with a slight smile. I simply created the opportunity for truth to emerge at the right moment. Why? You've been here 3 months. You barely know me. Clara studied me for a long moment. Do you remember Peyton? The name struck me like a physical blow. Peyton Voss? From the Chicago territory? Clara nodded. My older sister. My mind flashed to Peyton. Brilliant, driven, with the same observant eyes as the woman sitting across from me now. She'd been part of my team 2 years ago, one of my most promising territory managers. Until Oren forced her out, I said, the memories surfacing painfully. After she challenged him about taking credit for the Northwestern strategy she developed. She was systematically isolated, her successes attributed to others, her failures magnified, Clara said, her voice steady despite the emotion I could now see behind her eyes. She trusted the system to recognize her contributions. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. Her reputation was damaged beyond repair. She couldn't even secure references for new positions. I remembered how Peyton had gradually been excluded from meetings, how accounts she'd nurtured had been reassigned, how her once bright career had dimmed until she finally resigned. I'd tried to intervene, but had been overruled repeatedly by Oren, who cited personality conflicts and alignment issues. She's working at our parents' grocery store now, Clara continued, her finance degree collecting dust while she stocks shelves and processes deliveries. The depression nearly destroyed her. Guilt washed over me. I tried to help her, Clara. I really did. I know, Clara said, surprising me. Peyton told me you were the only one who stood up for her. That's why I requested placement specifically with you when I applied for the internship program. To what end? Revenge? Clara's expression softened slightly. Justice. And perhaps prevention. Peyton was his first victim I knew personally. You wouldn't have been the last. But how did you know what he was planning? How did you get those documents to Margot? I observed, Clara said simply. The same way you do. The same way Peyton taught me to. Patterns reveal intentions, especially when someone believes no one is watching. As for the documents and Margot's timely arrival, those answers would have to wait. Clara's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it quickly, then stood. We should leave separately, she advised. Oren is currently meeting with the executive leadership team. He'll be attempting to control the narrative. By tomorrow morning, he'll have a strategy in place to counter what happened today. What do I do in the meantime? I asked. Prepare for your meeting with Margot, Clara said. And don't trust anyone at the company right now. Not until we see how this plays out. I watched her walk away. This unassuming young woman who had orchestrated what might be either my professional salvation or my complete destruction. Because despite Margot's interest, Oren still held significant power within the company. And he'd just been publicly humiliated by an intern and the employee he'd tried to discard. Men like Oren didn't forget such things, or forgive them. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of uncertainty. I returned to my apartment, mind racing with questions about Clara, about Peyton, about what Oren might be plotting in response to the day's events. I prepared materials for my meeting with Margot, unable to fully focus as the scene from the conference room replayed in my mind. My phone remained conspicuously silent. No calls from colleagues expressing support or seeking explanations. No messages from HR regarding my employment status. The isolation was both telling and terrifying. At 8:30 the following morning, I arrived at Margot's hotel, choosing the side entrance to avoid being seen by any potential company representatives in the lobby. As I approached the elevator, a hand caught my elbow. Not that way, Clara said, appearing beside me as if from nowhere. There's a service elevator that will take us directly to the executive floor. You're coming to the meeting? I asked, following her through a maintenance corridor. I've been here since 7, she replied. Setting up. Margot requested my assistance with some technical details. The service elevator opened to a private hallway leading to what appeared to be the hotel's premium suites. Clara led me to a door at the end, knocking twice before entering. The suite had been transformed into an impromptu meeting space. A conference table dominated the main room, covered with documents and multiple laptops. Margot sat reviewing materials, while 2 other people I didn't recognize worked at separate stations. Ms. Vivica, Margot greeted me, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss. For the next 2 hours, I presented my territory transformation framework in detail. explaining the methodology I'd developed, the problems it solved, and the results it had delivered. Margot and her team asked insightful questions, probing the limits of the approach and its applicability to different market segments. It was the most thorough, respectful professional exchange I'd experienced in years. No one interrupted me. No one attempted to claim my ideas as their own. No one dismissed my expertise or questioned my authority on the subject I'd mastered. "This is precisely what we need," Margot concluded as we finished. "Your approach addresses the exact challenges we've been facing with our regional market penetration." "Thank you," I said, feeling a weight lifting from my shoulders. Perhaps there was a path forward after all, away from Oren and the toxic environment he'd created. "I'd like to offer you a position," Margot continued. "Heading our client strategy division, you'd have full authority to implement your framework across all our territories, with appropriate attribution and compensation." The offer was beyond anything I could have expected, a significant promotion, presumably with a substantial salary increase, working directly with an industry legend. "That's incredibly generous," I said, stunned by the opportunity. "I would be honored to." My phone buzzed with an incoming call, the screen lighting up with company HR director. I hesitated, looking at Margot. "You should take that," she advised. "It might be important to your decision." I stepped into the adjoining room of the suite and answered the call. "Vivica, this is Demira from HR," came the clipped, professional voice. "I'm calling regarding yesterday's incident at the quarterly meeting." "Yes?" I prompted when she paused. "The executive team has reviewed the situation and would like to meet with you this afternoon. They've placed Oren on administrative leave pending an investigation into certain allegations that have come to light." My heart raced. "What allegations?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but it appears there may have been a pattern of inappropriate behavior regarding intellectual property attribution and performance evaluations." "I see," I said carefully. "And my position?" "That's what the meeting will address," Demira replied. "But I've been authorized to inform you that the termination announced yesterday has been rescinded. The company is prepared to offer you a significant promotion and compensation adjustment to retain your services." The rapid reversal made me suspicious. Just yesterday, I'd been publicly fired. Now they wanted to promote me? What had changed in the interim? "What time is the meeting?" I asked. 3:00. The entire executive leadership team will be present." "I'll be there," I promised, ending the call and returning to the main room where Margot waited expectantly. "Interesting development?" she inquired. "They've placed Oren on leave and want to meet about offering me a promotion," I explained, still processing the whiplash-inducing shift. "It seems convenient." "Indeed," Margot agreed, "almost as if they've suddenly recognized your value now that another option has appeared." Clara, who had been quietly working in the corner, looked up from her laptop. "They received notification of Margot's job offer to you 30 minutes ago. An anonymous email detailing the terms was sent to the entire executive team." I stared at her. How could anyone know the terms? Margot just made the offer. "The terms were determined yesterday," Clara explained. "The email was scheduled to deliver regardless of whether you accepted immediately." I looked between them, realization dawning. You're working together. This whole situation, Margot's interest, the job offer, the timing of the email, it's all part of some coordinated plan. Not a plan, Margot corrected. A correction. A rebalancing of scales that had been deliberately tipped against you, just as they were tipped against Peyton Voss and others before her. "How many others?" I asked, a chill running through me. 7 that we've confirmed," Clara answered. "All women, all credited with innovative approaches that Oren subsequently claimed as his own, all eventually forced out through systematic isolation and manipulated performance metrics." "And you've been tracking this pattern?" I asked Margot. "Not initially," she admitted. "My interest in your framework was genuine. It was only after Clara contacted me with evidence of what was happening that I recognized the broader implications." "Clara contacted you?" I turned to my supposed intern, who met my gaze without apology. "After Denver," she confirmed. "When I saw Oren beginning the same pattern with you that destroyed my sister's career." The pieces were coming together, but something still didn't make sense. Why go through this elaborate scenario? Why not just report Oren's behavior to HR or the executive team? Because men like Oren rarely leave evidence that traditional channels can address, Margot explained. They operate in gray areas. They cultivate powerful allies. They control narratives. By the time conventional processes catch up, careers have been destroyed and innovations lost. So what happens now? I asked. Do I take your job offer or the company's promotion? Margot leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. That depends on what you want, Vivica. Justice? Advancement? Vindication? Something else entirely? I considered the question carefully. 6 years of my life had gone into building my career at the company. I'd created something valuable there, something that worked. But I'd also witnessed how quickly it could all be taken away, how little protection existed against someone like Oren, who knew how to manipulate the system. I began, then paused, realizing what truly mattered to me. I want to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Not just at our company, but anywhere Oren might go next. Clara and Margot exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. That, Margot said with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her, is exactly what we hoped you would say. We've been gathering evidence for months, Clara explained, opening a folder on her laptop. Not just about what happened to Peyton, but a systematic pattern dating back over 5 years. She turned the screen toward me, showing a timeline meticulously documented with emails, performance reviews, meeting notes, and account reassignments. 7 women's names appeared in sequence, including Peyton's and now mine, each following an identical pattern: initial support and mentorship from Oren, followed by gradual isolation after they developed something valuable, culminating in either resignation or termination. How did you access all this? I asked, stunned by the scope of the documentation. I didn't need to hack anything, if that's what you're wondering, Clara said. Everything here was obtained through legitimate access channels. Oren's mistake was thinking no one was watching, or that someone with an intern badge was beneath his notice. But this still doesn't explain why Margot got involved, I said, looking between them. This goes beyond professional interest in my framework. Margot's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. The first name on that timeline is Elise Farrow. She worked under Oren at his previous company before joining mine 8 years ago. She never told me why she left, only that she could no longer work there. 3 years later, she took her own life. The room went silent as the weight of her words settled over us. Her journals, which her family shared with me afterward, detailed how Oren had systematically dismantled her confidence, claimed credit for her innovations, and isolated her professionally. She believed her career was irreparably damaged. Even working at my company, she never fully recovered from what he'd done. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I promised her family I would watch for patterns like this in my own organization. Margot continued. When Clara approached me with evidence that Oren was continuing the same behavior at your company, I recognized my opportunity to fulfill that promise more broadly. This isn't just about saving your career, Viv, Clara added. It's about stopping a predator before he destroys anyone else. I took a deep breath, processing everything. So, what's the plan for the meeting at 3? That depends, Margot said, on whether you want to return to your company or join mine. I'm not sure I can go back, I admitted. Even with Oren on leave, the culture that allowed him to operate won't change overnight. What if you could change it? Clara asked. What if you had the leverage to ensure it does change? What kind of leverage? Margot nodded toward a sealed envelope on the table. Inside is an offer letter from me, Senior Vice President of Strategy. Double your current salary, full attribution for your framework, and a development team to scale it across all our territories. That's incredibly generous, I said. It's fair compensation for your expertise. Margot corrected. The offer is yours regardless of what happens next. But before you decide, you should understand the full situation at your current company. Clara pulled up another document on her laptop. This morning, 3 of your company's largest clients received detailed information about how their account strategies, which they've been repeatedly told were developed by Oren, were actually your creation. They've all requested emergency meetings with your CEO this afternoon. My eyes widened. You contacted our clients? Not directly, Clara said. Let's just say information has a way of finding the right people when properly channeled. Additionally, Margot added, an investigative business journalist received documentation about the pattern of intellectual property misappropriation within your company. They're preparing a feature story for next week's edition. But the most immediate concern for your executive team, Clara continued, is that 3 former employees, including my sister Peyton, have engaged legal counsel regarding wrongful termination and workplace discrimination. Their attorneys contacted your general counsel this morning. The strategic pressure points were perfectly targeted. Clients, public relations, and legal exposure all activated simultaneously. No wonder the company had suddenly discovered my value. So the meeting at 3 o'clock, I began, is damage control, Margot finished. They need you now, not just for your talents, but to demonstrate they value the innovation you represent, to show clients, the press, and potential litigants that they don't have a systemic problem. What exactly are you suggesting I do? Clara smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that transformed her serious face. Whatever you want, that's the point. For once, you have all the power in this situation. We've created the circumstances, Margot said. How you use them is entirely your choice. I sat back, contemplating options I'd never thought possible 24 hours earlier. I need to think. Of course, Margot agreed. The car will take you home and return for you at 2:30 if you decide to attend the meeting. Either way, my offer stands. As I gathered my materials, Clara handed me a small USB drive. Everything we've discussed is here, along with additional documentation you might find useful. Whatever you decide, you should be fully informed. The drive felt surprisingly heavy in my palm, the weight of secrets, evidence, and possibilities all contained in one small device. Thank you, I said, looking between them. Both of you. Whether this was about justice or revenge or something else entirely, you've given me choices I didn't have yesterday. Sometimes, Margot said as I reached the door, the line between justice and revenge is simply a matter of perspective. The executive conference room fell silent as I entered precisely at 3 o'clock. 9 people sat around the table, the entire leadership team, minus Oren. CEO Harlan Weiss rose to greet me, his typically intimidating presence softened by what appeared to be genuine concern. Vivica, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. He gestured to the chair directly opposite the power position, I noted, not the subordinate placement I would have been assigned yesterday. I set my portfolio on the table, along with Margot's sealed offer letter, placing it prominently where everyone could see the Renner International logo. I understand there have been some developments regarding my employment status, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Yes, Harlan acknowledged, glancing at the offer letter. There appears to have been a serious misunderstanding at yesterday's meeting. We want to assure you that Oren's actions were not authorized by this leadership team. I see, I said. And you've placed him on administrative leave? Pending a full investigation, confirmed Demira from HR. We've already begun interviewing team members about his management practices, including past employees? I asked. A flicker of discomfort passed between several executives. We're expanding the scope as needed, Demira said carefully. And my position? Harlan leaned forward. We value your contributions enormously, Vivica. The territory transformation framework you developed has revolutionized our approach to client engagement. My eyebrows rose slightly at the unambiguous attribution. So different from yesterday's narrative. To demonstrate our commitment, he continued, we're prepared to offer you a significant promotion. Senior Director of Strategy Implementation, reporting directly to me, with a 40% salary increase and expanded team resources. The offer was substantial, though still below Margot's. But more telling was the direct reporting line to the CEO, bypassing the entire management layer where Oren had operated. That's generous, I acknowledged. May I ask what prompted this reevaluation of my contributions? The uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything. They knew about the client contacts, the potential media exposure, the legal threats, and they were scrambling. We've been impressed with your work for some time, Harlan attempted. Recent client feedback has only reinforced our appreciation of your innovative approaches. Recent as in this morning? I asked quietly. Harlan's facade cracked slightly. Vivica, Let's be frank. We've received concerning information from multiple sources today that suggests we may have or overlooked certain issues within our organization. We're committed to addressing these comprehensively. Starting with retaining me now that I have other options, I observed, tapping Margot's offer letter. Your value to this company extends far beyond recent circumstances, Harlan insisted, though his eyes remained fixed on the Renner International logo. I opened my portfolio and removed a document I'd prepared during the hours between leaving Margot and arriving at this meeting. I've outlined some conditions for my continued employment, I said, sliding copies toward each executive. I'd like to discuss these before making any decisions. As they reviewed the document, expressions ranged from surprise to discomfort to grudging respect. My conditions were extensive: full attribution for my framework, review of all performance evaluations conducted by Oren over the past 5 years, establishment of an intellectual property attribution protocol, and creation of a mentorship program specifically designed to support women in strategy roles. These are substantial requests, Harlan said finally. They're requirements for my continued employment, I corrected, along with a public acknowledgement of my contributions to the territory transformation framework in all client-facing materials. The CFO, Bennett, who rarely spoke in these settings, cleared his throat. These programs would require significant resources. The mentorship initiative alone, CAT, would help prevent the company from losing valuable talent, I interrupted, and potentially avoid expensive legal actions like the ones being prepared by former employees. The mention of legal action silenced further objections. Harlan studied me with new awareness, clearly reassessing the situation and my unexpected leverage. We need time to review these requirements properly, he said finally. Of course, I agreed. I have another meeting with Margot Renner at 5 to discuss her offer. I can provide my decision by 9 tomorrow morning. As I stood to leave, Harlan asked the question I'd been waiting for. What exactly happened with Oren? From your perspective? I paused, considering how to answer. He systematically claimed credit for innovations he didn't create, manipulated performance metrics to control narratives, and eliminated people he perceived as threats to his position, particularly women who demonstrated exceptional capabilities. And you have evidence of this pattern? Harlan pressed. Extensive documentation, I confirmed, as do others. The tension in the room was palpable as the implications settled over the leadership team. Whatever they had known, or chosen not to know, about Oren's methods, they could no longer claim ignorance. 9 tomorrow morning, Harlan confirmed. We'll have our response to your conditions by then. As I reached the door, I turned back with one final thought. You should know that Peyton Voss was right 2 years ago. The Northwestern strategy was entirely her creation. Oren didn't contribute a single element. I left them with that uncomfortable truth, knowing it would prompt them to question what else they'd missed or ignored. The next 24 hours unfolded in a whirlwind of negotiations, revelations, and decisions. Harlan called at 8 the following morning, accepting all my conditions with only minor modifications to implementation timelines. Margot graciously supported my choice to remain with the company, noting that transforming organizational culture sometimes required working from within. Clara, surprisingly, also chose to stay, transitioning from intern to a newly created position focused on analytics and attribution verification. Her background, it turned out, included specialized training in data forensics, making her uniquely qualified to trace the origins of strategic innovations within complex organizations. As for Oren, his administrative leave became permanent separation 3 days later, after the investigation revealed a pattern exactly matching what Clara had documented. The company reached confidential settlements with Peyton and the other former employees, including provisions for career rehabilitation, support, and positive references. The media story still ran, but with a significantly different angle, highlighting how the company had taken decisive action to address intellectual property attribution and create stronger support systems for innovative employees, particularly women. Over the following months, I implemented my territory transformation framework across all divisions, with proper attribution at every stage. The client response was overwhelmingly positive, with several specifically requesting presentations on the methodology behind our approach. 6 months after that fateful quarterly meeting, I stood at the front of the same conference room, presenting our year-end results to the full team, now expanded to include 4 new strategists, 3 of whom were women returning to the workforce after career interruptions. The territory realignment has exceeded projections by 27%, I concluded, gesturing to the final slide. Any questions before we wrap up? Clara, now officially our Attribution Analytics Director, raised her hand. Perhaps you could share the new mentorship program metrics? Those numbers are particularly impressive. I smiled, appreciating her strategic redirect to highlight one of our most successful initiatives. Absolutely. The program has already supported 12 team members across various departments, with 3 promotions resulting directly from projects developed during mentorship. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, Clara lingered behind, waiting until we were alone. "Have you seen this?" she asked, sliding her tablet toward me. On the screen was a job listing for a strategy director at a mid-sized company in Denver. The description outlined responsibilities remarkably similar to Oren's former role. "Is that?" I began. Clara nodded. "He's interviewing there next week." I studied the listing, noting the emphasis on innovative approaches and transformative client strategies. "I wonder if they know about his history," I mused. "They will," Clara said simply, taking back her tablet. "By this evening, their entire executive team will receive detailed documentation about his pattern of behavior, as will every board member, their HR director, and the 3 finalists for the position, all of whom happen to be women with impressive innovation backgrounds." "You're still monitoring him," I observed. "Justice isn't a single action," Clara replied. "It's an ongoing commitment." I thought about Peyton, about Elise Farrow, about the other women whose careers had been damaged or destroyed by Oren's systematic appropriation of their work. "What about Margot?" I asked. "Is she still involved in this oversight?" Clara's expression softened slightly. "Margot understands personal costs better than most. She makes resources available when needed, but the monitoring is primarily my responsibility now." "And when does it end?" I asked. "How long do you track him?" Clara considered the question carefully. "Until the pattern stops, until he can no longer position himself to harm others, until the women he targeted have fully reclaimed their professional identities." She gathered her materials, preparing to leave. Elise Farrow believed she was alone, that what happened was her personal failure rather than systematic predation. Peyton thought the same until she found others with identical experiences. No one should feel that isolation. As she reached the door, I asked the question that had lingered since that first revelation 6 months ago. Was it worth it? All the planning, the documentation, the coordination with Margot just to stop one person? Clara turned back, her expression more open than I'd ever seen it. "Ask me that question when you meet Naomi Chen next week. She's interviewing for our new strategy position, brilliant innovator, forced out of her last company after developing an award-winning client approach that her male supervisor subsequently claimed as his own." "Another of Oren's victims?" I asked. "Different predator, same pattern." Clara replied, "She doesn't know yet that she's not alone, that what happened wasn't her failure, that her innovations matter and will be properly attributed here." I understood then that what Clara and Margot had engineered wasn't simply revenge against one man, but the beginning of a system to identify and counteract a broader pattern, creating spaces where innovation would be properly attributed regardless of gender or position. "The meeting is Tuesday at 10, Clara added. "I think you'll recognize something in her experience that resonates with your own." As she left, I remained in the conference room, contemplating how completely my professional life had transformed in 6 months. From public humiliation to leadership, from isolation to community, from powerlessness to agency. The company culture was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but measurably. Attribution protocols now ensured innovations were traced to their creators. The mentorship program was creating pathways for underrepresented voices, and most importantly, people like Oren could no longer operate unchallenged in the shadows. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Confirmed. Denver company just pulled the strategy director listing. Board chair requesting emergency meeting about hiring practices. I smiled, picturing Oren receiving the news that yet another opportunity had vanished, not through bad luck or timing, but because his pattern had been exposed by a network of women he had underestimated. Women who had transformed their individual experiences of injustice into a system of accountability that would follow him wherever he went. The most fitting revenge wasn't a single dramatic moment of humiliation. It was the quiet, relentless dismantling of the conditions that had allowed him to thrive at others' expense. It was creating a world where his methods no longer worked, where claiming others' innovations became impossible because attribution was verified, where isolating targets became futile because support networks existed, where manipulating metrics failed because transparent evaluation systems were in place. Clara hadn't just helped me reclaim my career. She had shown me how to transform an individual victory into systemic change, how justice for one could become protection for many. And in doing so, she had given me something far more valuable than revenge: purpose. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps more stories like this reach people who need to hear them. Have you ever witnessed someone taking credit for another person's work? Or have you experienced it yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. You never know who might find strength in knowing they're not alone.